Hello everyone, just thought I'd come on and share a news report that I've picked up in a broadsheet newspaper by the Daily Telegraph. Not normally a paper I would buy, I'm a Guardian man myself, but it was something I saw on the television yesterday that this particular paper was showing a report of a remarkable story of a young lady by the name of Mary Vines. I think that's how you pronounce her name, V-I-G-N-E-S. But anyway, I thought I'd just share it with everybody because obviously anything to do with the blood issue is worth looking at and learning from. And anyway, this girl, born with no blood, well enough to start school, that's the title of it. So let's just crack on and just read this very short caption. It's just this piece along the top here, and then maybe just give a point of view at the end. I think you already know where I'm going with this, don't you? A girl who was born with no blood in her body has started school 4 years after making a full recovery. Maisie Vines' entire blood supply was absorbed by her mother, Emma 31, during pregnancy. But she survived despite doctors describing her condition as unheard of. It was feared that Maisie, born 6 weeks premature in December 2009, would be left brain damaged after being starved of oxygen in the womb. She spent 2 weeks in intensive care, during which she received 3 blood transfusions, but has since passed all her developmental milestones and is now age 4, impressing her teachers at school. Mrs. Vines, a former hotel receptionist from Traymore, County Waterford, Ireland, said, "It was an unbelievable situation. None of the consultants had ever heard of anything like it happening before. There were previous cases of children being born with tiny amounts of blood, but Maisie had a hemoglobin level of flat 0. Wow." Mrs. Vines, who is married to Mook, 31, a graphic designer, experienced a problem-free pregnancy until the 34th week. She said, "I had a feeling something was very wrong. I was experiencing worrying, bloating, and Maisie had stopped moving completely. I attended an appointment at hospital, and the next day, and before I knew it, the consultants were telling me I needed to go for an emergency cesarean section. I was wheeled down to the theatre before I had a chance to tell anyone. I didn't expect to give birth 6 weeks early. I had no problems up to that point, so to find things moving so quickly so suddenly was very confusing and very frightening." After Maisie was born, she was taken to an intensive care unit, and Mrs. Vine said, "I didn't have the chance to see her before she was taken away. Nurses kept rushing in to keep me updated, but everyone was very glum and serious-faced. I learnt that Maisie had no blood, just a thin plasma substance in her veins. They tried to find a vein to take a sample, but they couldn't draw any out. She had the first of her blood transfusions through her umbilical cord." By the time Mrs. Vines was able to see her daughter for the first time, her breathing apparatus had been removed, but she was still being fed through a tube. She had 2 more transfusions and a platelet transfusion over the next 2 weeks. She was able to come home on Christmas Day, and which was the greatest gift we could imagine. Mrs. Vine said, "We were warned that Maisie might have brain damage because she was effectively starved of oxygen. The big milestone was to see whether she would start talking before 18 weeks. As if she did, it would be a good sign that her brain was developing in the right manner. When she said her first word, Dada, at 15 weeks, it was a huge relief and a very emotional moment. She's an amazing little girl, and we're so happy together as a family." Wow. So she had a platelet transfusion as well as 3 blood transfusions. The blood transfusions obviously to give her the hemoglobin levels that she would need in order for oxygen to travel around the body and to keep her alive. And so there's the question, an interesting one. Imagine that was a sister, a Jehovah's Witness sister, in the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. Look at the scenario there. Where would she go with this? You've got to remember that this happened very, very quickly. That there wasn't any time to react. Now this particular sister, if it was a scenario that she was a witness, would already have a blood card written out and be very prepared for any scenario that would be coming up as a result of this type of thing happening. Why? But I remember talking to a particular sister about a year before we left, who was pregnant at the time, and it looked as though she may be about to be planning for a cesarean due to medical situations of her own. So as a result of that, preparations were in place to make sure that no blood was transferred, or the instructions were that no blood would be used, or blood products. So here we have this scenario where this lady is having this baby and they've got to get this baby out straight away through cesarean, and the first thing that they discover is that there is no blood in the veins. An absolutely remarkable situation, and as the medical staff have said, it was unheard of. So there was only one alternative here. Well, let's say there are two alternatives. The one alternative is that this particular baby needs immediate medical assistance and needs a blood transfusion straight away. Or two, you let the baby die. It's that simple. Now, to a Jehovah's Witness, this is a nightmare scenario. This would be an absolute nightmare scenario, wouldn't it? Reason being, a newly born baby who is desperate and clinging on for life needs the assistance of the medical authorities to allow blood products, and in this case hemoglobin and platelets, to be added to this poor little child very, very quickly in order for it to survive and start to become independent in its breathing, and also then to start developing its own growth system. To a Jehovah's Witness, this is a major problem already. Where do you go with a situation like this when your affirmation is to make sure that this is a no? We cannot give our child a blood transfusion. Well, it's a no-brainer as to what happens next. It's because of the period of time we're talking about, the likelihood of this baby surviving any longer than a few hours is very real, and this baby would probably die. So there would be a need for the courts and the hospital to make an immediate phone call, an immediate ward of court. And as we know, there are judges available on the phone 24 hours a day that can pick up and be receptive to this, because they know they haven't got any time to start deliberating. What matters is that the baby or the patient, especially minors, is dealt with within minutes of a phone call being dealt with. So the judge would automatically look at the facts and say, yes, get on with it. And that's what would happen. A ward of court would happen within minutes. If it turned out that the medical staff realised that this was a Jehovah's Witness and that the blood issue was a non-option. I ask all Jehovah's Witnesses that may be watching this in the future, although this is just a speculative case scenario, it was real for these parents and it was real for Maisie. Unfortunate for her, she wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, and so the treatment and the automatic response from everybody concerned was just help her live, help her survive. But for a Jehovah's Witness, they can't even get to that stage. They're not going to get over the first hurdle, because they flatly refuse to accept the blood products. Now in this case, because of what's being used here with the platelets, that's one of the primary four. That's a non-starter. They won't be allowed that. And certain hemoglobin levels, they would be allowed, which is this is what makes it so confusing. So depending on where you are and how your attitude is, some Jehovah's Witnesses will have hemoglobin because it's permitted. But the platelets, no, you can't have the platelets. It's one of the primary four. So that's what makes this interesting. They would have part of it, but not the full amount. And therefore the baby dies, unless the courts take over. Can you see the sort of debilitating, disabling of the mind that takes place here with this whole area of undue influence on the patient on the parents in this particular case for this to happen. There's far more going on than most medical experts will probably see. What they'll see is what needs to happen with the treatment. What they won't see is all of the additional control levels and mechanisms that are going on inside that parent's mind to stop this from happening. Thank goodness we can use the ward of court. Thank goodness the state can step in and save the baby's life. We ask all Jehovah's Witnesses to think very carefully about this. Do you honestly believe that the Almighty Creator wants to see a baby like Maisie pass away? Do you really deep down believe that? I think if we're being honest, no, we don't want to see that. And if He's made in our image, surely He wants us to live and live productive, loving lives. He doesn't want sacrifice for His name. He's not on the altar of throwing babies into a death pit for His name. It makes a mockery of what the Creator is supposed to be about. That's all I wanted to say on this subject, because I wanted to share it to allow people to just look at the philosophical side of this. Here is a case where this baby had no chance unless she was actually brought into medical treatments and blood products immediately. And fortunately for her, she was allowed to do that without any fences being put in the way. If she had belonged to the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, then that baby was in acute danger, not only from the physical aspects of what she was dealing with, but also of the men in New York who control the edicts of the blood dogma. So I just wanted to share that out there. I hope everybody's well. I'd be interested in your comments as they come through. And if you are a Jehovah's Witness, please, I hope you see this in the spirit that it's intended to help you and assist you in waking up, that you do live in a world of undue influence, that the blood dogma is nothing more than a ridiculous set of scenarios now, that when you do your research you will see that it completely contradicts itself when you look at exactly what fractions you are allowed to have and the blood volumes involved with those. So please think very carefully, do your research, and allow yourself to live, because guess what? Your Creator really does want that. He doesn't want your sacrifice. As Jesus Christ said, He wants mercy. Thank you for listening.